On a cold, rain-soaked night in Portland, Oregon, the sound of 5 gunshots shattered the stillness of a quiet suburban street. Inside a modest home on Selwood Avenue, an 18-year-old honor student named Mateo Martinez lay lifeless in his bedroom, his gaming headset still on, his life cut short in seconds. Within hours, detectives would uncover a trail of digital footprints, journal entries, and obsessive text messages that led straight to a 17-year-old girl, once described as brilliant, kind, and full of promise, his ex-girlfriend, Viola Colleen. What began as young love between 2 high-achieving teens had spiraled into a chilling story of obsession, control, and ultimately premeditated murder. But beneath the headlines and the courtroom drama lay a haunting question that would divide a community. How does a promising student become a cold-blooded killer, and did anyone see it coming? Before we dive deep into this tragic true crime case, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life courtroom stories, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how these cases reach viewers all around the world. And tell us, do you believe a 17-year-old should face a 70-year sentence? Your thoughts might just start the next big debate below. The November rain came down harder than usual that night in Portland, washing the quiet streets of Selwood in streaks of silver beneath the dim streetlights. It was a Friday evening like any other, the kind where families gathered around dinner tables and teenagers disappeared into glowing screens, lost in video games or late-night chats. Inside a modest 2-story house on Ashworth Avenue, 18-year-old Mateo Martinez sat in his room, headphones on, the faint rhythm of gunfire from his virtual world echoing through the walls. He didn't know that, outside, in the cold and dripping dark, someone was watching. Someone who knew his schedule, his habits, and the exact moment his parents would be gone. That someone was his ex-girlfriend, Viola Colleen, and she had come prepared. Neighbors later told investigators they first thought the popping sounds were firecrackers. Strange for November, but not impossible. Within minutes, those muffled cracks were followed by the desperate wail of sirens racing down the narrow street. By the time first responders arrived, the house was eerily still except for the soft hum of Mateo's computer screen illuminating his lifeless body slumped over in his gaming chair. He had been shot 5 times at close range, 3 in the chest, 2 in the head, with precision that left detectives certain this was no random act of violence. A faint trail of muddy footprints led from the shattered window to the street, where the rain had already begun erasing traces of the killer's escape. Detective Gabriel Pfizer was among the first to arrive. A 20-year veteran of the Portland Police Bureau, he had seen countless tragedies, but something about this scene felt deeply unsettling. The boy's room still carried the innocence of youth. Soccer trophies, college acceptance letters, a half-eaten sandwich on the desk. A framed photo of Mateo and Viola lay face down on the carpet, its glass cracked down the middle. It's almost like she wanted him to see her face before she pulled the trigger, Pfizer muttered quietly to a forensics technician as they photographed the scene. The detail was chilling not because of its brutality, but because it felt personal, intimate even. Outside, reporters began to gather behind the yellow tape, their breath fogging in the cold air as they exchanged rumors. Within hours, whispers spread through Portland's quiet neighborhoods. The shooter might be someone Mateo knew. At Roosevelt High, where both teens were seniors, text messages buzzed through group chats. No one wanted to believe that Viola, the straight-A student, the scholarship contender, the girl who once helped tutor struggling classmates, could be involved in something so monstrous. But as officers secured the evidence, one clue after another pointed in her direction. The missing Glock 19 from her father's gun safe, the muddy shoe prints matching her size, and most damning of all, the digital trail she had unknowingly left behind. By dawn, the rain had eased, but the city seemed to grieve in silence. News vans parked along the street, headlights cutting through the morning fog as crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze. Inside the Martinez home, the smell of gunpowder still hung faintly in the air. A once ordinary bedroom had become the starting point of a story that would soon captivate the nation, not because of who died, but because of who killed. A 17-year-old honor student, once full of promise, had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And in that moment, as the first light touched the wet pavement, Portland began to realize that the tragedy of November 15th was only the beginning. Before her name became synonymous with one of Oregon's most shocking murders, Viola Colleen was the kind of student teachers bragged about. 17 years old, top 10 in her class, with a resume that promised an Ivy League future, she was the quiet girl who never broke rules, the one who color-coded her notebooks and volunteered at animal shelters on weekends. Her classmates described her as disciplined, focused, maybe a little intense, but never dangerous. Her family lived in a sleek home overlooking Portland's West Hills, a symbol of stability and success. To her parents, Viola was their pride, their prodigy. But inside that carefully maintained world, something darker had been building, something that would eventually unravel with the precision of a plan years in the making. Those closest to Viola noticed the changes first. The bright-eyed honor student who once spent evenings sketching or reading psychology articles began retreating into isolation. Her parents thought it was just senior year stress, the pressure of college applications, the weight of being perfect. But her journal, later recovered by police, told a different story. Scrawled between study schedules and college essays were fragments of anger, jealousy, and fear of abandonment. "He promised he wouldn't leave," one entry read, written just weeks before the murder. "But I see him smiling without me, laughing with others. It makes me sick." To an outsider, they might have seemed like teenage heartbreak. To investigators, they would become the roadmap to a motive. At Roosevelt High, Viola's relationship with Mateo had once been the envy of classmates. They were the golden pair, the soccer captain and the scholar, both destined for bright futures. Teachers adored them, parents trusted them. But behind the smiles, Viola's affection had begun to shift into obsession. Friends later recalled how she would text him constantly, sometimes hundreds of messages in a single day, demanding to know his every move. When Mateo started pulling away, trying to focus on school and soccer, Viola's messages grew sharper, colder. "You think you can just forget me?" she once wrote. "You'll remember me forever." Those words, later read aloud in court, sent chills through everyone who heard them. Psychologists who analyzed her behavior after the arrest suggested Viola's obsession stemmed from what they called attachment collapse, a term for when love turns into control and control into violence. She couldn't accept losing the person who defined her self-worth. To her, Mateo wasn't just a boyfriend. He was proof she was lovable, important, irreplaceable. Without him, she saw herself as nothing. That mindset, combined with her intelligence and precision, made her uniquely dangerous. She wasn't impulsive. She planned. Every step, from stealing her father's gun to timing Mateo's parents' dinner reservation, was calculated. As dawn broke over the West Hills the morning after the shooting, Viola sat silently in her family's garage, her clothes soaked from the rain. When police arrived hours later, she didn't argue or cry. She simply nodded, extended her wrists for the cuffs, and said nothing. The girl who once seemed incapable of harm was suddenly the prime suspect in a cold-blooded killing. And for the first time, her parents and the entire city were forced to ask the question that would haunt every courtroom session to come. What really broke inside Viola Colleen? When Viola Colleen met Mateo Martinez in their junior year chemistry class, it seemed like a storybook beginning. She was the brilliant perfectionist with quiet charm. He was the charismatic athlete with an easy smile and boundless patience. Their chemistry wasn't just academic, it was electric. They became inseparable almost overnight, the kind of couple teachers pointed to as an example of balance. She helped him study, he reminded her to have fun. They were seen holding hands in the hallways, sharing coffee after school, whispering about futures that stretched beyond Portland's rainy skyline. For a time, it felt genuine, innocent. But even early on, there were subtle signs that something was off. Small remarks, moments of tension, glances that lasted too long when Mateo spoke to someone else. Nobody thought much of it then. As the months passed, Viola's need for control began to seep through the cracks of their young romance. Friends remembered how she'd get irritated if Mateo didn't text her back immediately, or how her mood could swing from affectionate to icy in the span of a single conversation. What started as concern, "Where are you? Are you okay?" shifted into interrogation. "Why didn't you answer? Who are you with?" Mateo's friends teased him about being whipped, unaware that those late-night calls weren't cute but suffocating. He started to make excuses for her behavior, saying she just cared too much. But caring had turned into surveillance. She tracked his social media likes, accused him of lying, and began showing up uninvited to his practices, his study sessions, even family dinners. Mateo's journal, later found by detectives, revealed a growing fear he hadn't shown anyone else. "I think she's following me," he wrote weeks before his death. "I tried to end it, but she won't let go. I don't want to make her angry." His words painted the picture of a young man torn between compassion and self-preservation. He didn't want to hurt her, but he knew staying might be even more dangerous. When he finally broke things off that August, doing it in public so she wouldn't cause a scene, Viola's reaction was volcanic. She cried, begged, screamed, then went silent. And silence, for Viola, was the loudest warning of all. Over the following weeks, Mateo noticed her car parked near his soccer field. Sometimes it was there when he arrived, sometimes when he left. Friends said he brushed it off, but those close to him knew he was unnerved. He began double-checking the locks at night, asking his coach to walk him to his car, and telling his parents he thought Viola might show up again. Still, he didn't report her. Like many young men, he believed things would calm down, that she'd move on. But while Mateo was trying to live, Viola was writing. Her journal filled with venom, lists, grievances, and one page titled, "Ways He'll Pay." That list would later become a blueprint for murder. Looking back, everyone at Roosevelt High could recall the day they realized the relationship they'd once admired had become something darker. The girl who once smiled through the halls had grown distant, her eyes glassy and cold. Mateo, once easygoing, seemed constantly distracted, glancing over his shoulder in crowded halls. Their love had turned into a silent tug-of-war between affection and control. And when control began to slip through Viola's fingers, she decided she'd rather destroy everything than be left behind. In the months leading up to the murder, the warning signs were everywhere, so visible, in fact, that they now seem impossible to have missed. Teachers at Roosevelt High remembered Viola's sudden withdrawal from group projects, her temper flaring at the slightest criticism, and the way she'd stare blankly at her phone for long stretches as if trapped inside her own mind. Friends who once confided in her began keeping their distance, unsettled by how quickly every conversation turned back to Mateo. Even casual mentions of his name could send her spiraling into emotional outbursts or eerie silence. Yet each time someone suggested she talk to a counselor, Viola would flash that polite smile, the same one that convinced adults she was fine. On paper, she was thriving. Excellent grades, college recommendations, flawless attendance. Behind the mask, she was unraveling. Mateo, meanwhile, was trying desperately to move on. He focused on soccer practice, college applications, and helping out at his family's restaurant. But no matter how he tried to separate from the past, It followed him like a shadow. Viola began showing up unexpectedly, outside his games, near his car, even once outside his home, pretending it was a coincidence. Texts from her grew darker, more desperate. "You think I'm done?" one message read. "You'll never be rid of me." Mateo showed the texts to his best friend Jordan, who urged him to tell his parents. But Mateo hesitated. He didn't want to ruin her reputation or escalate things. He thought she was hurting, not dangerous. That hesitation, detectives later said, may have cost him his life. At school, rumors started spreading about Viola's increasingly erratic behavior. Some classmates claimed she had a secret social media account where she posted cryptic messages about betrayal and revenge. Others recalled her breaking down in tears in the bathroom one afternoon, screaming that Mateo had replaced her. A counselor reached out after hearing concerns from teachers, but Viola brushed it off as stress from college pressure. To anyone who didn't look closer, she was just another overachiever under strain. To those who did, there was something unsettling in her calmness, as if she were rehearsing a version of herself she no longer believed in. One particularly chilling detail emerged later from a fellow student who had seen Viola at a local hardware store in early November. She was buying gloves, duct tape, and a box cutter. When asked, she laughed it off, claiming she needed supplies for an art project. No one thought twice about it. After all, this was Viola, smart, polite, incapable of harm. But detectives would later confirm those same materials matched evidence collected from Mateo's broken window. It was a clue hiding in plain sight, ignored because no one could reconcile the image of a perfect student with the makings of a murderer. In hindsight, the tragedy wasn't born from a single moment, but from countless small ones that people overlooked. Teachers who saw the red flags but assumed it was stress, friends who sensed danger but didn't want to meddle, parents who trusted their daughter's smile more than their instincts. The truth was simple and devastating. Everyone saw pieces of the storm building, but no one believed it would strike. By the time they realized the truth, it was far too late. By early November, Viola Colleen's obsession had hardened into intent. What had once been jealousy and heartbreak now took the shape of a calculated mission. Detectives would later piece together the timeline from her phone searches, journal entries, and surveillance footage, revealing a chilling level of precision. She studied Mateo's parents' routines, noting what time they left for dinner each Friday. She mapped out the quickest route to his house, timing how long it took to drive there and back. In one entry, dated November 10th, she wrote, "He'll be alone. I know when the lights go off. I know how long the street stays quiet." Every word revealed a girl who wasn't just angry. She was preparing. Each passing day drew her closer to the moment she decided to make her fantasy real. She began by stealing her father's Glock 19 pistol from the gun safe in their bedroom closet. The lock required a key, one she knew her mother kept hidden in a jewelry box drawer. That small act of betrayal marked the point of no return. Viola had fired a gun once before at a family cabin. She remembered the weight, the recoil, the noise. So she practiced again in the woods outside Portland, using an old crate as a target, her trembling hands slowly learning to steady. She wasn't impulsive. She was rehearsing. Investigators later found those shell casings buried under wet leaves exactly where her phone's GPS data placed her that afternoon. For someone so young, her preparation carried the chilling calm of an adult with nothing left to lose. In the days leading up to the murder, Viola began driving past Mateo's home, each time circling the block, watching the lights in his window. She knew when he studied, when he played video games, when his parents went out. On her phone, she created a folder titled Evidence, a play on his initials, MV, containing screenshots of his social media posts and photos taken secretly from her car. One image showed Mateo through his bedroom window, unaware, headphones on. Another showed his parents' car leaving the driveway. Detectives who discovered the folder described it as a digital diary of obsession, documenting every detail she needed to strike. Her phone history revealed searches like how to enter a house quietly, gunshot distance indoors, and Oregon murder sentencing laws. It was no longer heartbreak, it was homework. On the morning of November 15th, Viola attended school as if nothing was unusual. She handed in her calculus assignment, chatted with classmates, even joked with her teacher about senior stress. That night, her parents left to meet friends for dinner. Viola waited 15 minutes, changed into dark clothes, and took the gun. At 8:15 p.m., security cameras captured her silver Subaru driving toward Mateo's neighborhood. The rain had begun to fall again, steady and cold. She parked a block away, cut the screen on Mateo's window, and crawled inside. What happened next would last only seconds. 5 shots. 1 life ended. 1 life destroyed. Later, when detectives searched Viola's room, they found her journal open on the floor. The final entry, dated the morning of the murder, contained a single line written in red ink. "He thinks he can forget me. Tonight, he'll remember." Those words, more than any fingerprint or bullet casing, told investigators exactly what had driven her. It wasn't madness. It wasn't impulse. It was a decision, a deliberate, devastating choice born from a mind that refused to accept being left behind. The call came into Portland's emergency dispatch just after 8:30 p.m. A neighbor reported hearing gunshots, followed by a scream and the sound of shattering glass. Within minutes, patrol units arrived on Selwood Avenue, lights cutting through the rain. Detective Gabriel Pfizer, who lived less than 10 minutes away, was among the first at the scene. What they found inside Mateo's bedroom would haunt every officer present. The teenager slumped forward in his gaming chair, headphones still on, the soft blue light from the monitor flickering over his motionless face. His phone buzzed beside him, one unread message from a friend asking if he was still online. In those first moments, no one imagined that the shooter had already disappeared into the same storm that now washed away the evidence. But as Pfizer examined the shattered window and the muddy prints below it, he knew instantly this wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was personal. Crime scene investigators moved quickly, photographing every angle before the rain could erase it all. One of them noticed something odd. A small gold pendant caught under Mateo's desk, its chain broken. It bore the letter V. Pfizer picked it up, staring at it for a moment before slipping it into an evidence bag. It wasn't proof, but it was a whisper. The rest of the clues soon followed. A partial shoe print near the window matched a women's size 7 Vans sneaker. Security cameras from a neighbor's doorbell captured a blurred image of a figure in dark clothing running toward a small silver car. A plate number wasn't visible, but the make and model were consistent with Viola Colleen's Subaru. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape before dawn. Back at the station, detectives pulled Viola's digital footprint. Within hours, they had access to her phone data, social media activity, and GPS logs. The evidence was overwhelming. Her phone had pinged within 300 feet of Mateo's address at the exact time of the shooting. She had deleted several recent text threads, including one that read, "You don't get to replace me." And perhaps most damning, her internet searches revealed chilling preparation. Everything from gunshot trajectories to how to erase fingerprints. When Detective Pfizer showed the findings to his captain, the room went silent. There was no doubt left. The suspect wasn't a stranger. It was the girl everyone thought they knew. At 6:42 a.m., officers arrived at the Colleen residence. Viola's parents were still asleep when they heard the knock. She was found sitting in the garage, still wearing the same clothes, her hair damp from the night before. The gun rested on the workbench beside her, wiped but not clean. When officers approached, she didn't resist. "You're here for me?" she said quietly, her voice flat. She didn't cry or plead. She simply extended her hands, as if she had been waiting. Detective Pfizer would later describe her eyes as hollow, like she'd already left the world behind. News of her arrest spread through Portland before noon, sending shockwaves through schools, neighborhoods, and social media. Students gathered in disbelief, teachers wept in the hallways, and Mateo's parents, still reeling from the night's horror, could barely speak when reporters approached. In less than 12 hours, the story had gone from tragedy to unthinkable revelation. The straight-A student with a spotless record had confessed to the most calculated act of violence imaginable. As Viola was driven away from her home in handcuffs, rain still dripping from the eaves, one question echoed through the crowd that gathered outside. How could a girl like her do something like this? The interrogation room was small, sterile, and silent, except for the steady hum of the fluorescent light above. Viola Colleen sat across from Detective Gabriel Pfizer, her wrists cuffed to the metal table, her expression unreadable. Hours had passed since her arrest, yet she hadn't asked for food, water, or even her parents. She sat motionless, hands folded, eyes fixed on the reflection of herself in the mirrored wall. Pfizer, a man who had interviewed killers, liars, and broken souls for decades, sensed something different here. Viola didn't look defiant or remorseful. She looked detached, like someone watching her own story unfold from a distance. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was calm, deliberate. "Viola," he began, "we just want to understand what happened. Help me understand why." She blinked once, then said softly, "You already know why." Pfizer started with routine questions, where she had been that night, who she had seen when she last spoke to Mateo. Viola answered each with precision but no emotion. She denied being near Mateo's house, claimed she'd stayed home studying. But when detectives presented her phone records, her composure began to fracture. The GPS data didn't lie. Her car had been in Mateo's neighborhood. Her internet searches painted a portrait of premeditation. "How do you explain this?" Pfizer asked, sliding the printed logs across the table. Viola stared at the papers, then whispered, "He made me invisible. I just wanted him to see me again." It was the first time she had shown a glimpse of what was happening beneath the surface. A mix of obsession, rejection, and fractured identity. Detectives shifted tactics, moving from confrontation to empathy. Pfizer leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You loved him, didn't you?" Viola's eyes glistened for the first time. "More than he'll ever know," she said. "He promised we'd be together. He said he couldn't live without me. But then, he did." Her tone hardened on the last words, revealing the anger that had driven her. Pfizer pressed gently, asking whether she had planned the shooting. She shook her head but avoided his eyes. "I didn't plan to, not at first," she murmured, "but I kept thinking about how he laughed with her, how he forgot me. It's like I didn't exist." In that moment, it became clear to investigators that this wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. It was the culmination of months of fixation and emotional collapse. When Pfizer placed the pendant found at the crime scene on the table, Viola's facade finally cracked. Her breath hitched, her shoulders trembled. "You dropped this," he said. "Was it an accident, or did you want us to find it?" Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. "I wanted him to remember who did it," she said. It was a confession without formality. A moment so quiet, the room itself seemed to stop breathing. Pfizer turned off the recorder moments later, knowing the case had just shifted from speculation to certainty. Viola Colleen, 17 years old, had admitted in her own words that she pulled the trigger. As officers led her from the room, she paused at the doorway and looked back. "He shouldn't have left me," she whispered. To some, it sounded like regret. To others, defiance. But to Detective Pfizer, it was something far worse. A glimpse into a mind that believed love and possession were the same thing. The recording of that session would later become the most haunting evidence played in court, capturing the exact moment the mask of the perfect student fell away, revealing the cold truth beneath. By the time Viola Colleen's trial began, the entire state of Oregon was watching. News stations broadcast live updates, social media overflowed with opinions, and true crime forums dissected every new piece of evidence as though it were a national event. The courtroom itself was packed from day one. Rows of journalists, students, and families squeezed shoulder to shoulder, waiting to see the girl who had once been their classmate now standing accused of murder. Viola entered in a gray suit, her hair neatly tied back, her face calm but pale. The jury, 12 men and women from across the county, studied her every move. Some saw a monster, others saw a broken child. No one knew which version of her would speak first. The prosecution opened with a statement that sent a chill through the room. This was not an accident, not a moment of madness, but an act of cold calculation. They played the interrogation tape, Viola's own voice echoing through the courtroom. "He shouldn't have left me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Prosecutor Dana Mendez laid out the evidence piece by piece. The stolen gun, the practice casings from the woods, the chilling journal entries, the GPS trail, and the text messages that chronicled her descent into obsession. Every detail painted Viola not as a confused teenager, but as someone who had meticulously built a plan to destroy the boy she couldn't control. When photos of Mateo's room were displayed, several jurors averted their eyes. His parents wept silently in the front row, clutching each other's hands. The defense, led by attorney Robert Lane, faced an impossible task. His argument wasn't that Viola was innocent. He knew the evidence was irrefutable, but that she wasn't fully in control of her mind. He described her as a brilliant young woman whose emotions fractured under unbearable pressure. Psychologists testified that Viola suffered from obsessive-compulsive tendencies and attachment trauma, claiming her mental state blurred her sense of right and wrong. Lane pleaded for understanding, painting a picture of a teenager crushed by expectation and abandonment. But the prosecution countered with one devastating point. Mental struggle doesn't erase intent. She didn't break in a moment. She prepared for weeks. That line would later echo through headlines across the country. Throughout the trial, Viola spoke only once. Taking the stand, she stared down at her hands as Lane asked, "Why did you do it?" Her answer came barely above a whisper, "Because he stopped loving me." The simplicity of it stunned the courtroom. No outburst, no dramatics, just a chilling honesty that stripped away any illusion of innocence. The prosecutor stood and asked one final question. "Did you ever think about his family?" Viola hesitated, then shook her head. That moment sealed her fate. Whatever sympathy lingered in the room vanished with that single gesture. When closing arguments ended, the jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Reporters waited outside as gray clouds gathered again over Portland. When the verdict was read, guilty of first-degree murder, Viola didn't flinch. No tears, no gasps, just silence. Mateo's mother wept openly. His father whispered, "Justice," under his breath. For everyone in that courtroom, it was over. But for Viola, it was only the beginning of a sentence that would last nearly a lifetime. The sentencing hearing took place 3 weeks later, under skies as gray and heavy as the mood inside the courthouse. The gallery was filled once again. Students, neighbors, teachers, and reporters, every face drawn with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Viola Colleen sat at the defense table, dressed in the same gray suit she'd worn throughout the trial, her hands clasped neatly in her lap. She hadn't spoken since the verdict, hadn't cried, hadn't asked to see her parents. The air in the room was thick with quiet anticipation. Judge Marianne Coulter, known for her strict sense of justice, adjusted her glasses before addressing the court. "This case," she began, "is not just about a single act of violence. It's about the consequences of obsession. and the irreversible pain left behind. Her tone was steady but heavy with the weight of what she was about to deliver. Before the sentence was read, Mateo's family was given a chance to speak. His mother approached the podium, her hands trembling as she unfolded a sheet of paper. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. "My son was kind, gentle, and full of life. He forgave easily. I hope one day I can do the same." She paused, tears streaking down her face. "You took everything from us. Our laughter, our future, our peace. I will never understand why." Mateo's father followed, his tone quieter but sharper. "I don't hate you," he said, turning toward Viola, "but I pity you, because one day when the noise fades and the silence sets in, you'll have no one left but yourself." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of his footsteps as he returned to his seat. When it was Viola's turn to speak, the entire room leaned in. For a moment, it seemed like she might finally reveal remorse, or at least regret. But when she lifted her head, her voice was calm, almost detached. "I wish I could explain what I was thinking," she said. "I loved him too much. Maybe that's what destroyed us both." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of guilt, just that haunting sentence that seemed to hang in the air long after she stopped speaking. Even her attorney looked down, knowing those words had only deepened the wound. The judge took a deep breath, then began to read the decision. "For the charge of first-degree murder," Judge Coulter declared, "this court sentences you, Viola Colleen, to 70 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 60. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Viola blinked slowly, but didn't cry. Her mother sobbed into her husband's shoulder, her body shaking uncontrollably. The judge continued, "You were young, intelligent, and capable of understanding the magnitude of your actions. That makes this crime not just tragic, but unforgivable." The gavel struck once, the sound echoing through the chamber like a final heartbeat. As deputies led her away in handcuffs, Viola turned one last time toward Mateo's parents. For a fleeting second, something flickered in her expression. Guilt, sadness, or perhaps realization. But it vanished as quickly as it came. Outside, the crowd surged with reporters shouting questions. "Do you feel remorse? Was it worth it?" She said nothing, stepping into the waiting police van as flashbulbs erupted around her. The door slammed shut, sealing her fate. In that moment, Portland closed one of its darkest chapters, yet the echoes of it would linger for years, a story of love twisted into tragedy and a young life spent paying for the moment it all went too far. In the months that followed the sentencing, Portland slowly returned to its rhythm, but the shadows of the case still lingered. The story of Viola Colleen and Mateo Martinez became a symbol, a cautionary tale that played out in classrooms, counseling sessions, and dinner table conversations across the state. Teachers spoke to their students about emotional boundaries, warning signs, and the dangers of confusing love with control. Parents began checking in more often, asking quieter, more serious questions about relationships that once seemed harmless. The trial had forced an entire community to confront an uncomfortable truth. Obsession doesn't always begin with malice. Sometimes it starts with love that's simply never taught where to stop. At Roosevelt High, Mateo's old locker became a memorial. Students taped photos, letters, and soccer memorabilia to the door, a collage of memories honoring a boy whose kindness had touched so many. His friends organized an annual soccer match in his name, raising funds for youth mental health programs. Viola's name, though rarely spoken aloud, hovered like a ghost in the background, a reminder of how brilliance can spiral into darkness when pain festers unchecked. Teachers who had once praised her academic excellence now spoke of her as a lesson in what happens when emotional distress hides behind straight A's. Even the counselors admitted that they had missed the signs, that sometimes tragedy isn't born of evil, but of silence. Detective Gabriel Pfizer, who had since retired, gave one final interview about the case. He said what haunted him most wasn't the crime scene or the confession, but how ordinary everything seemed before it happened. "You could walk past both of those kids on any given day," he said, "and you'd never think something like this was possible. That's the danger. We assume the worst monsters will look the part." His words resonated far beyond the police department. They became the backbone of new outreach programs in Oregon schools. Initiatives teaching teenagers how to recognize emotional manipulation, how to seek help, and how to let go without destruction. In prison, Viola Colleen kept to herself. Reporters tried for interviews, psychologists requested studies, but she declined every offer. According to a guard's testimony years later, she spent most days reading or writing letters she never sent. One note, intercepted by prison staff, contained a chilling line. "I still see him sometimes, in my dreams, sitting by the window. I wonder if he forgives me." Whether it was guilt or self-delusion, no one could say. But her words revealed a haunting truth. Viola's punishment wasn't just 70 years behind bars. It was living each day with the echo of what she had done, knowing she had destroyed the only person who had ever truly seen her. The tragedy of Viola and Mateo left behind more than grief. It left a mirror, a reflection of what happens when love turns into ownership, when pain turns into obsession, and when silence becomes the loudest warning of all. For some, it was a story of justice. For others, it was a reminder that even the brightest minds can lose their way in the dark. But for everyone who heard it, the message was painfully clear. Love, without understanding, can be as deadly as hate. And if anyone had looked a little closer, listened a little sooner, perhaps 2 young lives could have been saved instead of lost forever.